Everything has a name, and sometimes that name has a story behind it.
You know, South Texas has no shortage of history to pass along. That's why meteorologist Justin Horn has traveled hundreds of miles over the years to find out how did that town get that name.
In this KSAT Explains, Justin looks at the towns he's visited and he answers that age-old question, what's in a name?
Asking if South Texas is interesting is like asking if the cedar tree is allergy-inducing. Of course it is. And so interesting, in fact, that they've made movies about it.
Hollywood thought it was perfect too, filming the movie 7 Days in Utopia here, starring Robert Duvall.
And borrowed intersecting streets for hit songs. This town is home to the corner of First and Amistad. It doesn't look like much, but it's the only intersection in the country with that name. And if it sounds familiar, there's a good reason for that.
Yes, it's the intersection made famous in the 2009 song, You Found Me by The Fray.
That was in Quemado, where the origins of the town, which translates to burned or scorched, isn't quite certain. But there are multiple theories.
It was because the Spaniards thought it was a remains of an old volcano.
And it wasn't the first time we ran into some name origin tales that caught us off guard.
And they came up with the name Wolfart.
Yes, Wolfart. It's a German name that received more than a few laughs.
There was a bird that kept flying around that kept saying something like, kee, kee, kee.
Rumor is, from all the locals, that it did get its name from a card game called Coon Can.
Not the heinous.
A common mistake, but wrong.
And remember, there's no anus in Dehennis.
I never messed that one up again, out of respect for the fine folks of Dehennis, which, if you were curious, was founded by the famed Henry Castro and originally named Dihani. As we often do, we put our Texas spin on it. But it turns out it wasn't the only town in the area that's been mispronounced.
The ones that we usually hear are Jordanton.
Or as it was today with an out-of-town caller.
Jordantown.
Which is wrong.
Which is totally wrong.
What do you think about green?
Green? I think it's very green and beautiful.
And they just went, oh, Miko.
And for the record,
no, it is not Miko.
It's Von Army. It's pronounced with an A.
Born, Bernays.
Bjorn, Burn. They always say Born.
We tell people weekend at Bernie's or Bernie. That's how you pronounce it.
I think we can all agree that the odd vowel structure of the German language can be a bit challenging. But as it turns out, the German settlers to the area were also good at understanding irony.
They called it Camp Comfort, thinking it was going to get easier and better, and it didn't. And so they named it, they dropped the word camp, and they went to comfort because there wasn't any.
Ironic indeed. And while we're on the topic of literary devices, it turns out that back in the 1800s, spelling was a bit of an issue for some of our local county and state officials.
Back in the old days, not everybody could read or write or spell.
Leaving us with what we see today.
It wound up being Dimmitt, D-I-M-M-I-T. They dropped the second T.
But when the paperwork came back, it officially declared the town as Divot. So Pivot had to pivot and stick with Divot.
Post office dropped the E and added an A.
Yes, Natalia should have been Natalie.
Natalie was the daughter of famed engineer Dr. Frederick Pearson, who was the designer and financer of Medina Dam. In a tragic twist, he died along with his wife in the sinking of the Lusitania, an event that propelled the United States into World War I. And if you thought the connection to presidents and world events ended there, you'd be wrong. In fact, many area communities have had some direct ties to presidents. Some pretty recognizable names have lived in Cotulla through the years, including a U.S. president who was a teacher here at the Wellhausen Elementary School, which is now the LaSalle County Appraisal District.
That president was Lyndon B. Johnson. One of the early landowners in this area was Charles Taft, the 27th President William Howard Taft's half-brother. He would build the famous Taft Summer House, and as the legend goes, complete with oversized bathtubs for his portly brother.
A house that was later moved and used by former Texas Governor Dolph Briscoe. Another big name, one of many we discovered along our journeys. And Poteet has another claim to fame. It is the birthplace of George Strait. He was born here at this hospital, which has long since shut down.
Jeff Bezos' grandparents also owned a ranch near Cotulla. Meet Count Norbert von Army, an Austro-Hungarian nobleman who came into money and grew tired of Europe. And Freetown's jail, too, still stands. The second floor cells holding some famous outlaws.
My understanding is Jesse James and Frank James spent the night there.
It's a former military installment with a rich history. Charles Lindbergh even landed here. For its size, Uvalde boasts an impressive list of hometown celebrities. Of course, you have Matthew McConaughey.
Legend had it was actually John Wilkes Booth had survived and was able to escape after assassinating President Lincoln and settled here in Bandera.
We can't confirm that, but if you dove to the bottom of Canyon Lake, you'd probably find evidence of Hancock and Cranes Mill, both towns that have disappeared from the map. That was also the fate of Pauley, a town named after famed Tejano Jose Policarpio Rodriguez.
And you compare him to the guy from Tennessee who killed 10 bears. Well, he killed almost that many on this first trip to the valley here.
And over the years, the stories kept coming.
St. Hedwig is the patron saint of Silesia. It's hard to imagine that in the early 1900s, this small town was known as the Saratoga of the South, a nod to Saratoga, New York, because of all things, the spa industry. No, there's no mythical monster amongst the trees. Rather, the town's namesake is this colorful character, William Bigfoot Wallace.
Panna Maria, after the Virgin Mary. Panna Maria in Polish means young girl.
And so he said, Montana is just not the name for this place. I'm going to name it after Sir Thomas More's Utopia, the perfect place to be.
A perfect name. And ask any resident from any of these towns, and they'll tell you they live in the perfect place with a name that generates plenty of pride and provides for some interesting history. For KSAT Explains, I'm Justin Horn.
And now you know the stories. Or a lot of them.
Yeah.
You can watch any KSAT Explains story on demand by scanning this QR code. You can also find Explains on the KSAT YouTube channel.
You know, I think wall fart may be my favorite.
I think it's Cassie's favorite.
It's got a certain ring to it.
2 out of the 3 in the studio seem to approve. Too bad it was changed. We'll be right back. Okay.
Keep up to date with all of San Antonio's top news, weather, and so much more by clicking the like and subscribe buttons below. And once again, thanks for watching KSAT.